Well, welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements.
Today, we are going to jump right in. We have a great guest today. We have Lacy Cooper, who is running for Attorney General for Arizona.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you
having
so
me on,
much
guys.
for being here.
You bet.
It's great to have you.
So, why are you running? I mean, it's a question I ask. I think I might have asked you that the first time we met. Because it is always, as a guy who's been in politics for 30 years, but never run myself, came close once. I just don't understand. Why would you put yourself through this?
And I've been part of politics for 30, 40 years. I get asked to run a lot, and I think about it. I'm like, no, I like being in the
Oh, look at
background a
Chris.
little
Oh, I've been asked to run all the time.
bit. All the time. I don't want to do it. So we have deep admiration for people who are in the
Yes,
arena, for
even
sure.
those that
Thank
we
you.
disagree with.
Yeah,
Not that we disagree
absolutely.
with you, because we don't.
And there are a lot of people running for Attorney General.
Yeah,
There are a lot of
you've
people
gotta-
in the arena.
Yes.
Even some people who claim that they're Republicans, but they're not.
We know better.
Yeah.
We know better. Anyway, about you. What motivated you?
Well, I was the Border Security Section Chief for the U.S. Attorney's Office under the Trump administration, and we were, I don't know if you remember this, but we were actually securing the southern border not that long ago.
Wow, what a concept.
Yeah. And it was
That's
clear.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It was clear to me that the new guy moving into the White House did not care about border security. It's been way worse than even I predicted, but I left the U.S. Attorney's Office right after Biden moved into the White House because I didn't want to work for him. I didn't even know if they would have a border security section chief under the new administration. And I wanted to fight back and hold the Biden administration accountable.
Wow, that's about as good a reason as you can come up with.
Well, and do they have a border security chief?
They've
Yeah.
renamed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it now? Do we know?
I think it's called,
Let's let them in.
yeah.
I mean, it can't be anything serious.
No, it can't.
Because they're not
be.
doing anything serious. In fact, the serious things they're doing are making it worse. So, I mean, that's a big responsibility you had. What did you learn from that experience that you can bring to the Attorney General's office?
Yeah, one of the major battles that we are going to have as far as the border is concerned is in the courtroom. And holding the Biden administration accountable for what they are deciding to do means that you have to file lawsuits against them. And because I have this experience that has given me, a lot of knowledge about immigration law and what's supposed to be happening and how the changes that the Biden administration are making to our immigration policies actually affect our state and actually open up the border, I'm best equipped to know what we need to do as far as lawsuits are concerned to hold them accountable.
Interesting. What's your take? The Supreme Court, was that this morning? What are we, Thursday, the 30th? I think it was this morning that they ruled that Biden could reverse the Trump remain in Mexico policy.
Yeah.
What impact will that have on Arizona, and what can we do to counter that?
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to read the full opinion yet. Let me just back up to when I was the Border Security Section Chief and this program was initially rolled out. It was the most effective program that we have had, maybe historically, for securing our southern border and from deterring migrants from coming here illegally. And the reason is that if folks came here and made an asylum claim, they would have to wait in Mexico to determine whether that asylum claim was valid or bogus. Well, for the folks who had bogus asylum claims, they were not interested in coming here and waiting in Mexico for someone to tell them what they already knew, which is that they don't have a valid asylum claim. So we actually saw a huge drop in migrant crossings when that program was in place, and then the Biden administration got rid of it almost immediately. Now, the language of the statute is, I have hope for where we're headed, because the language of the statute is that the Biden administration may use the Remain in Mexico program. May. It's a three-letter word. It's very important here because it gives discretion to the federal government about whether they want to implement the program or not. There are other statutes in the immigration world that say shall. Right. Shall means not discretionary. And right now, the Biden administration is not doing the shalls. And so there will be additional cases that come on the heels of this one that say, okay, you think may means may, now let's talk about the shalls. Sure. The shall detains, then the shall deports. Those are the things that they're not doing right now. I think that Justice Kavanaugh has already flagged for us that that is where we are headed in the oral arguments. The Biden administration's attorney said, we don't have enough bed space to detain all of these people. You know, that's, gosh, we have this really big problem. Now, we should add that they're getting rid of bed space. So you're creating the problem that you're now saying you have a problem with. But Justice Kavanaugh said, I'm not sure how that is my problem. I'm here to interpret what the law says. And so when we're talking about whether you shall detain someone, it's not really my problem whether you have the resources or not. So I think that that's where we're headed, is that we're going to see those cases go up that are analyzing those statutes that require the Biden administration to do something, and I'm optimistic that we're going to get a good result.
And what you're describing has been sort of the cornerstone of the debate of immigration for a long, long time, and that is we have laws on the books that say shall. We have a lot of laws on the books that say shall, and yet we have people in Washington who want to, propose, immigration reform and comprehensive immigration reform, and we need new laws to do this, that, or the other, when actually we just need the government to enforce the laws that's currently on the books. And I think that's what's going to play out in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, when people say to me, is this going to work if we're actually just enforcing the laws that we have? Yes, it will, because it did work under the Trump administration.
I was going to say that there were no new laws passed on immigration from the time right before Trump got elected to when he left office. But immigration flow was down significantly. Illegal immigration flow was down significantly. That obviously means the laws were being enforced, or at least enforced better than they were under Obama, and clearly better than what they're doing now.
Right. But we do need immigration reform. There are some loopholes in our immigration laws that we need to close. We need to get a red wave this year so that we can take back the House and the Senate and get some laws passed. For instance, this law really drives me bonkers, but somebody can cross the border illegally. So they come over the wall, they come through the desert, they come through, the Rio Grande River, and then, which is, it's a crime, right?
Sure.
And then claim asylum. So you've committed the crime of coming in the country illegally, and then you can throw up your hands and say, oh, I'm an asylum seeker. That law was from the 60s, I believe. At the time, people didn't have GPS on their phone. And so maybe you could justify that someone can't find the port of entry,
Right.
So they're going to just cross wherever they can and then, claim asylum. We are way past that now. Everyone has GPS on their phone. They know exactly where the port of entry is. They intentionally don't cross there, right?
Yeah.
The Haitian migrants that crossed at the Del Rio Bridge, I think, is a really good example, because they were all being given specific instructions about how to get to the Del Rio Bridge.
That opens up a whole nother question about how coordinated this is.
It's very
in terms
coordinated.
of the surges.
Yeah. of
Well,
course
the
it is.
cartels.
Yeah. Well, the cartels, but I mean the money that it entails that nobody wants to talk about in terms of keeping these people moving and feeding them and clothing them and making sure that they get to their suggested
What is your
destination.
conspiracy
Suggested.
theory here?
It's not.
Yes.
I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think it's actually being talked about. Like, where do they get the money for these?
A conspiracy
surges?
theory is not a theory if the
not.
conspiracy is real, right?
That's right.
Well, there's theories, and then there's the reality of what's happening.
Yes.
And examining what's happening is that we have these surges that are obviously orchestrated.
Well, do you think they're orchestrated by people here, or is this something coming out of Central America or Mexico?
That remains to be seen. I think there's a lot of support from groups here. Yeah, for sure. And probably some international groups as well.
Interesting.
What I have seen mostly is that, of course, the migrant coming here has to pay somebody to get them here. They pay a smuggler, and then the smuggler usually works for the cartel, or at the very least pays the cartel a fee in order to get here. And it's costly. It is really expensive. If you come even across the border in Mexico, you're going to pay $4,000 or $5,000 just to get across one country's boundary. If you're coming from Central America, you're paying 10, 12, 15 grand. So the question is, where does that money come from?
Where's the money coming from? It seems crazy
Most of the time,
when you read this. And then there's the human trafficking part as well.
yeah. Most of the time, that money is coming from someone here in the United States, a migrant who's already gotten here, is working, whether legally or under the table, and sends money back home through remittances for their family member to pay the 10 grand to get here. So it's not positive, but it's not necessarily the conspiracy theory that you're touting. But
A lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I'm with you. I think we do need immigration reform. I think we need to make it. I mean, we will, as long as we are a shining city on a hill that is the land of opportunity, that people want to seek the American dream. There are going to be people who risk their lives to get here. We need to figure out a system, because if you're a 21-year-old guy in Mexico, say, hey, I want to go to America. If you try to do it legally, it's going to take you, 14, 15 years because of the backlog, and that's just not sustainable. Of course he's going to try to come across illegally. But the first step is doing what you did in the Trump administration, which is shut this down and try to control that illegal traffic so that we can get a handle on what's going on in our country so that we can understand how to do that reform.
Right. And Chris, you mentioned the human trafficking component of this. When you don't provide a legal pathway that's, approachable for someone to get here from their home country, and instead invite them to come here illegally, what happens is that folks take a very dangerous journey from their home countries, walking or catching rides or whatever to get here. And women are raped along the way. Children are trafficked. They are bought, borrowed, and stolen in order to be a ticket into the United States. Folks drown in the Rio Grande River on a regular basis. They are trafficked here for sex or labor. That is the reality of what's happening at the southern border right now. We have a humanitarian crisis that the Biden administration is just turning a blind eye to, as if that's not their responsibility. It is absolutely your response. You created this mess.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so every migrant who dies in the desert because you invited them here, that death is on your hands.
Or dies in the back of a truck in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which we saw this last week, which was just horrible.
Awful. So obviously immigration is a big deal for this race. What, and clearly you have some experience that sets you apart from your opponents. So the Democrat, there's only one, right? Is it
Yes.
Chris Mays? Mm-hmm. My hunch is that she's not where you are on the immigration issue.
On most issues.
Right. What would you say obviously you can set yourself apart from the experience you have on the immigration issue, but what other issues besides immigration do you feel like need to be focused on and are strengths of yours?
Well, I also have 3 times the prosecution experience of any other candidate in the race. So, for folks out there who are worried about the 2020 election being properly investigated and people prosecuted and the law applied to the facts so that we're not, just aggressively prosecuting somebody who's innocent, I am your candidate because I have 15 years of prosecution experience at the state and the federal level, and no other candidate can touch that. There are, lots of crimes that the AG's office prosecuted, but there's a whole lot of crimes that they actually don't have the authority to prosecute. It's a state legislature who gets to decide what powers the AG has. And so I've been advocating for the AG to be given the authority to prosecute any felony crime. Right now, if somebody commits a felony, a theft or something like that, the county attorneys are the only ones who have the authority to prosecute that crime. And if we have a county attorney, like we have seen DAs in California, who say, I'm just not interested in prosecuting shoplifting under $1,000, which I think we are moving in that direction in some of our counties, then there is no other option for that crime to be prosecuted. And I'm perfectly happy with a right of first refusal situation. If the local county attorney is not interested in prosecuting, they get the first dibs. But we don't have a backup plan right now for who is going to prosecute those cases. And although the AG has some oversight authority over the county attorneys, they're elected officials with autonomy, of their own. And the concept of prosecutorial discretion can be bent almost to a breaking point if you have a progressive, leftist county attorney who's just not interested in prosecuting crime.
Well, and we got hopefully Rachel Mitchell wins her race, but there's a very leftist candidate for Maricopa County Attorney.
Yes.
And
supported by George Soros.
Yes,
fully,
and
and unapologetic about
Right,
that as well,
right.
which
And-
is bizarre.
and she would follow in the footsteps of the San Francisco DA, the LA DA, where they're like, if it's less than $900, I'm not going to prosecute it. And so you have this rampage on stores by groups of people who individually take less than $900,
Well, and then
but
you-
together it's tens of thousands of dollars.
And you have local businesses that are decimated.
Yeah.
Right.
And so for all this talk about local businesses, well, they're the ones who pay the price.
That's
Right.
right.
And national business as well. In San Francisco, Targets, Walgreens, everyone's closing because
Right.
they just can't sustain their business model with
Well,
that
yeah,
type
I mean,
of law
your-
in place.
Your breakage percentage is now through the roof because you've got all this stuff getting stolen and no way to get recompense on
No.
it.
It impacts
crazy.
the local community too, who now,
Absolutely.
especially in the lower socioeconomic areas, somebody doesn't have, transportation, and they relied on that CVS as one
Right.
of their major places where they got, groceries or healthcare items or whatever, and now the CVS is shut down.
Yeah.
So now you got to walk farther to get what you need. It's the left is so broken. they
it's a great way to
have
put it.
double speak. They have hypocrisy. They're always advocating for folks to be lifted up, and then in the same breath they're breaking people down.
Great way to put it. Great
Yeah.
way to put it. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah.
Where'd you come from? How'd you get here? How did you get into law enforcement and being a prosecutor, that kind of thing? That's an interesting track. I mean, there's obviously it's a necessary job, but not very many people do it.
Well, I was born in New Mexico, right on the Texas border in oil country. And so my dad's side of the family was all boys, and they were all required to, play football or baseball throughout the week and then go and work in the oil fields Saturday morning from a young enough age that it probably violated some child labor laws. And
There were
my-
no child labor laws in the Permian Basin back then, I'm
Oh,
sure. Right?
I'm sure. I'm sure. And then my mom's side of the family, they were educators, and my granddad's there's a gym in her hometown that's named after my grandfather. But we moved here to Arizona when I was 7, so that's sort of my legacy and my background. Strong work ethic and an emphasis on education. But I really grew up here. I went to Dobson High School, Mesa kid, and I went away to college. I went to Texas A&M actually for my undergrad because they offered me a full ride, and I thought, well, I'll go away from home, but I'll be really close to family in case something goes wrong.
Right.
And had a good experience there, and then I went to the University of Texas for law school. It was top 15 school at the time. It was a great opportunity to go there, and then I came back home to practice. When I got here, you can hear, I have a little Texas accent, and it comes out when I start talking about Texas, so you can hear home, a little my accent there. So I came here, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I took the bar. I had done some civil practice that I didn't enjoy, so I wasn't even sure that I was going to be an attorney. I didn't know how this was going to end, and it was God placing me in this job. I am 100% confident that he was the one who put me at the Healy County Attorney's Office, because the first week that I was on that job, I was like, this is it. This is so fun. I loved reading, police reports about crimes that people committed, and I loved doing justice every day and making sure that victims were taken care of. And I would prosecute people in the morning, and then I would see them at Walmart in the evening as small town politics. And it was a lot of fun. I did fun things, but I also did some very, very difficult and serious cases. After 2 years, they promoted me so that I was the sex crimes prosecutor. So child molesters and child pornographers were on my list of folks to go after. And, that kind of case work, speaking of Rachel Mitchell, she did that for almost her entire
Yeah.
career. I couldn't do it, only that kind of work because it takes a special person. It can really get to you. But I also led the drug task force there. We had a methamphetamine problem at the time. Now it's fentanyl, but meth was rampant. And we would work, together, law enforcement and me, to figure out who are the most prolific meth dealers in town, and then we would aggressively go after them. I also prosecuted all the white-collar crime and fraud happening in northern Gila County, especially folks who were taking advantage of our elderly population and the financial exploitation of them. But we only had, Payson is not the county seat. Globe is.
Right.
So Payson, we had 3 attorneys to handle all the crime
Wow.
happening in northern Gila County. So you get thrown in the deep end.
Yeah, you get all those yahoos from Show Low coming down the mountain and committing crimes.
Yeah,
in
but it's a
Payson.
pretty diverse county. I mean, you have a lot of divergent interests there between Payson and then the mining interests in Globe,
Right.
in Miami, and then the reservation interests as well.
That's right.
And what happens when they come into Globe and crimes committed and things like that. So and there's a lot of drug trafficking through there too.
Right. It's
I know a little bit
corridor.
about it. We had a branch in Globe for many, many years.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I spent
and
a
it-
lot of time in Globe and a lot of time in Payson.
For 2 of my years at Show Low High, believe it was my freshman year and my junior year, we had the 2 largest drug busts. I mean, huge drug busts. Dozens of kids, bunch of parents and adults. And it was, one of the rings was an LSD and something else, and then the other was meth, which is why I probably percolated down to Payson after they got busted in Show Low. That's why I said that. But sorry, Show Low, I'm just kidding.
But the real question is, who did you root for, Globe or Miami during, football season?
I think
That's why
Payson
she was in
High, right?
Payson.
Yeah.
She was a Longhorn. Anyway, well, Payson.
A double Longhorn.
Yeah, that's
you know?
right, because you were at University of Texas.
That's right.
That's fascinating. I didn't even think about that. So you were extra cheery at the football games.
Yeah, extra. That's right.
How
extra
long were
cheery.
you at Gila County?
For 6.5 years, and then I left there and I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay, from
and
there.
became a federal
Okay.
prosecutor.
It's probably not very common for a small town or small county prosecutor to end up at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
No, not really. But I practiced in front of the same judge over and over and over again for 6.5 years, and he had a relationship with the then U.S. attorney, and so he wrote, a 3-page letter of recommendation for me, and he sent it off, and then he got a postcard back that said, "Thanks for this letter of recommendation, but we're not hiring right now. We're in a hiring freeze." And I said, "Thank you, Judge. It's so nice of you to write that for me, but there's no way I'm going to be an AUSA, an Assistant United States Attorney." But a couple weeks later, they had a thaw on their hiring
Thaw.
freeze. And they
Someone
said,
left the freezer door open.
that's right. And they said, "Well, I think we're going to hire a few. We're not sure yet." And I was able to sneak in with that batch of folks. And I felt very blessed. Going to interview at the U.S. Attorney's Office, you go to their lobby and they've got an American flag and an Arizona flag and, the president's photo on the wall. And I was like, this is it.
This is the next step.
This is it. Yeah.
The next door God is opening.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
There's,
Amazing how that works.
I think every prosecutor sort of one day dreams of being at the U.S. Attorney's Office and
Sure.
being a federal prosecutor. And so I just was very thankful to have that experience.
That's great.
That's very cool.
Well, how do you see this race? I mean, we're in the next, month or so of this race. How
Early
do you-
ballots go next week.
Early
right?
ballots go out, the 7th? And how do you, what's your goals over the next month, and how do you see this race panning out?
It's an interesting race with 6 candidates. All the polling up to this point has been, I'll just say that we're all tied for last in that we're,
Right.
everybody's
Sure.
at the bottom, and 65% of voters haven't even thought about the Attorney General's race yet. It's down ballot. The governor's race is pretty hot. The Senate race is also very active. And I
But
think,
even those have high numbers of undecideds.
yeah.
I mean, which is in some ways good for you. That actually gives you more time to campaign because the argument I've made, I think I made this last week on the podcast, is that Republican voters are going to hold their ballot because there's so many races that they don't really have any opinion on.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
If
very
somebody-
few are going to get their ballot and then fill it
Yeah,
out
and if
right
they
away.
do, they're not persuadable, so you don't need to worry about them. They're going to do whatever they're going to do. So you've got people get their early ballot, and they're going to hold on to it for 2 weeks, or as we talked about before, they don't trust the mail because of what Trump said, so they're going to walk their ballot in on election day, and we're going to, be waiting for results for weeks again.
I'm
And
planning
in a
on
six-way race, it's not going to take a huge number.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be close. So, in Oklahoma, this congressman or this person running for Congress in the open seat, there were 5 candidates within 5% of each other because the top candidate was at 16%. He won with 16%.
Wow.
So,
That really could
And that could happen.
Yeah, it absolutely could happen.
I mean, if you all got 10 plus, then it's under 20.
It could create a mess for a couple weeks.
Somebody asked me, what are you going to do on election night? And I said, well, I'm going to go campaign until the polls close, and then I'm going to go to bed. Because I don't think
Because
that
it's not going to matter. I admire what you just said because there's so many. It is amazing to me how many candidates get to election day and it's like, oh, I'm going to go play golf or I'm going to go to the movie. It's like the polls close at 7, dude. You need to be on the phone.
Getting your
campaigning,
people
getting them
to the polls.
Yeah, it's astounding to me.
I've
when
done
I see,
all I can do. No, this is actually
or when I see
D-Day.
volunteers or campaign staff, which is even worse, saying, "Oh, it's 10 o'clock in the morning on election day. We're going to go set up for the election night party." No, you hire somebody to do it. Whatever. You freaking campaign until right at the end. So good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've got the right attitude on this. I like that.
Well, and then once all the votes are cast and the polling's done, go to bed.
Yeah,
Shut off the TV.
Yeah.
Don't be like us.
Right.
Two crazy politicos sitting there until 11 o'clock at night saying, there's got to be more votes in that county than that county.
11, 3 a.m.
Yeah.
I mean, well, and it's going to be.
When
it won't
2020,
be-
you and I were texting each other until about 1.
It was late.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But and their attorney general's race could be the same way. It could be back and forth and people leading and people not leading
Right.
all the way through the evening.
So what's been the favorite thing that you didn't expect as running being a candidate, running a campaign?
I love educating folks, especially about what's happening at the border, but not just. So whether that's a speaking engagement where I get to talk about what's really happening, or writing op-eds to educate folks, and there's so many people out there who are thirsty for that information and want to know more, and I really appreciate that about Arizona voters, that they want to be educated, and so many, when I go speak at a Republican room, there are a lot of very educated people in that room. They are learning their Constitution, and they're learning about each of the candidates so that they can make the right decision. And I very much appreciate that about Arizona voters.
Yeah. Well, I think, the interesting thing about the Attorney General's race and the primary is that there's some really good, qualified, decent people running, and I think that's a testament to the position, but also just to people's character.
Yeah, it's nice to be in my race, I'm not going to lie, compared to some of the other ones that have gotten pretty ugly. There's a lot of mutual respect amongst most of the candidates, and we treat each other as such. So.
Yeah, it seems like it. I watched some debate footage, and it was very congenial, except for one person. So
A little
anyway,
different than the one last night, the governor's debate on PBS last night.
Yeah.
If you haven't had a chance, I
didn't watch it.
I watched it for, I don't know, 5-8
The
minutes,
governor's
maybe.
race is going to get nasty now. It's going to be, the next month is going to just be tar and feather. With Matt getting out the last couple of days, it's going to be how much mud can we throw?
Yeah,
Which,
I don't know.
It's a contact sport, right?
It is.
And if you don't like it,
But it can be civil, as
It can be civil,
you
sure.
mostly have seen in the AG's race,
Yes.
right?
well, and these are lawyers too, and
Yeah, that's good.
They're lawyers.
Yeah, we're
they
dull.
can't be taking themselves too seriously. We're lawyers. I mean, you either know the law or you don't.
Right. Right.
And, there's some people who just have no clue what the law is, but that seems like the ones who are running for AG's race even their opponent, Chris, knows the law, or just her viewpoint of the law is a little bit skewed.
Very skewed.
Yeah.
Lacey, where can people find you and learn more about you?
My website is lacycooper4az.com. That's FORAZ.com. And, has my background on there as well as my statement on the issues. So I'd love for folks to go and look at that. I also do kind of an overview of what needs to happen with changes in immigration law. So if you're interested in getting more in the weeds on that topic, there's a 5-part series in there on border security.
Wow. Well, and I guess no one better to tell us about that than you, given your experience there. So,
Yeah.
well, what would be your closing statement? We're not a debate, but what the message you have for voters as we wrap this up.
Yeah, you had asked me sort of what's the strategy going forward. I think that I have a winning message because border security is the number one issue facing our state and our country today. It just is. Border security is national security. There were 242 migrants apprehended on the terrorism watch list since October. So we have to get control of our southern border, and I'm the only candidate who has the experience to get that done, which is why I've got the endorsement of the National Border Patrol Council. They believe that I will actually be able to, hit the ground running on day one to fight back against the Biden administration's open border policies. And, having 3 times the prosecution experience of any other candidate in the race, we are seeing rising crime, violent crime, and we're about to see rise in property crime with inflation and the rise in gas prices, and folks are struggling, and so that is sort of what happens next is property crime. So to have a pro-police, anti-crime person as the top law enforcement officer in the state, I think is what our state needs today.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we agree.
Good.
Absolutely.
Absolutely agree. We agree on that.
So thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much for being in the arena and for what you've done for our state, which is tremendous. And
our country.
And our country. Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
So God bless.
Good.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks
luck,
for listening.
Lacey. Thanks, guys.